Hello, everyone. Just a note before we get started today that there is a mention of suicide in this episode. If you would like some help or you would like to support someone else that's struggling with their mental health, please reach out to Lifeline on 13 11 14. Thanks. Take care.
This characteristic of men means that by the time they get to the doctor, the disease is worse than it needed to be before they started to get help. And of course, if your disease has progressed further, it's harder to treat. You go from preventing severe illness to having to deal with treating the severe illness.
Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello and welcome back. Welcome back to another episode. Today's episode is one I've been wanting to record for a very long time, and it's the first episode that I'm dedicating to men's mental health. And our understanding of men's mental health is critical, not only for the men who are listening, shout out to all you fellas, but also to the other people listening who care for men, parents of young men or boys, and anyone who would really like to understand more about the males in their life. And if this is an episode that you find really helpful, be really brilliant if you could share it with someone. It's very easy to do in your podcast app. And while you're there, it would also be really awesome if you could please share a rating and a review. That would always be appreciated. So my guest today is Dr. Tim Moss. Tim has a PhD in medicine and spent 20 years as a research scientist focusing on improving the lives of preterm babies. Tim went on to study science communication and is the health communication manager for Healthy Male. And we're going to learn more about Healthy Male in just a moment. Tim and I actually go way back. We've pretty much known each other our whole lives. We went to school together. Tim was in my brother Adam's year, a couple of years ahead of me, and I was in his sister Danielle's year. Danielle and I still regularly catch up. And Tim's gorgeous mum, I was just saying to Tim, I remember she used to teach us to make these beautiful little dough people out of bread dough, and we'd bake them in the oven and paint them. And she was my very first manager in my first job at the age of 14 and 9 months at Target in Frankston. So, Tim, it's just a delight to reconnect with you in this way. Thank you for joining us on Hello Anxiety.
It is my pleasure to be here, Jodi. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. And before we get started, I'd really just like to take a moment just to help listeners understand a little bit about the state of play when it comes to men's mental health and the statistics, which are quite frightening to be honest with you. What we know is that on average, 1 in 8 men will experience depression and 1 in 5 will experience anxiety at some stage in their lives. And we also know that despite women experiencing depression and anxiety at higher rates than men, men actually make up an average of 7 out of every 9 suicides every single day here in Australia. And this podcast, Tim, just as a little bit of a background, we have a global audience. It's quite extraordinary, right through to your old friend and my brother AJ, who lives and listens in the UK. These statistics are Australian stats, but it's an issue on a global scale. And what we know is quite staggeringly, the number of men who die by suicide in Australia every year is nearly double the national road toll. So my hope is that during this episode, we can really support the men who are listening with their own mental health and introduce them, and as I said earlier, the people who really care about them, to some really great resources as well. So, Tim, could you start by telling us about Healthy Male?
Yeah, sure. Healthy Male has been around for a little over 20 years, Jodi. They began as an organisation called Andrology Australia, which was based within Monash University. In fact, one of their first employees was a good friend of mine. I feel like I've come sort of full circle by taking on the role that I have now in Healthy Male. Healthy Mail rebranded a few years ago. It's a not-for-profit organisation. It's funded by the Australian federal government, and we provide information and education for the public and for health professionals, mainly primary healthcare professionals. So we produce a range of information products, for want of a better term, um, online articles for health practitioners or for members of the general public. People can subscribe to a weekly email that contains news related to men's health and well-being. We produce a magazine called The Mail, a hard copy magazine that we distribute somewhere between 5 and 10,000 issues of twice a year. And then there are education courses. So there are general practice continuing education point awarding courses that we provide, and other courses as well for health professionals of all disciplines, really, who are interested in men's health. The organisation started off largely concerned with men's sexual and reproductive health, but over the last few years, we've started to expand our remit, which has seen us now begin touching on men's mental health. One of the awesome things about the organisation is that it's a small group of us, and our CEO is not interested in replicating things that exist elsewhere. We're very good at what we do. We know what we're doing, and we know how to do it well. So we collaborate with other organisations to provide information for men about different aspects of their health.
Oh, thank you for sharing that synopsis of the amazing work you do. And I know it's an awesome place to work. You love working there, yes?
I do. Absolutely. It's the most enjoyable place that I have ever worked, without doubt. Like you, I had a job when I was 14 years and 9 months old, just across the other side of the car park in McEwen's. Um, I, yeah, I can't imagine a better place to work in terms of workplace culture. But I can't imagine a better place for me to work as well. I was reading some Brené Brown stuff recently, just for completely different reasons, and came across the idea that there are places where one can fit in, and then there are places where one feels like they belong. And I have always fit in up until, well, in professional circumstances, I've always fit in. Now I feel like I belong. It's an awesome feeling.
Oh, that is such an amazing thing to say. And I just got chills when you said that, because isn't that what everybody wants for themselves and what we all want for our kids when they grow up, when they're in their own workplaces? And I imagine many people feel the former. They fit in, they get the
Mm.
job done, but belonging is powerful.
Yeah, it is. It's, well, I mean, it makes doing the work easy. That's the first thing. In a place where you feel like you truly belong, I think it offers me a freedom to uh, to to do my role in a way that I feel is right. Um, I, I know that there is different managers will manage people differently, and my manager's good at managing me. I'd never been managed before I got to this job, so I think that's part of it. But the freedom to pursue what interests me, uh, and to apply what I can do in the context of this job is it's entirely liberating. It's glorious.
I'm really happy for you, because I know what that freedom feels like. And I think that it's very, very hard for a lot of men who are in roles that where they fit in and they get the job done, but don't have the autonomy, the agency that they might like to have. And it's no doubt a part of life that contributes to their mental health. And I know that when I talk to, my husband and to other men that I know, that there's this responsibility of being the breadwinner and being the person that goes out and does the 9 to 5 or whatever the arrangements are. Things are much more flexible these days. But also, Peter and I have talked before about the fact that, well, women can often take a bit of a break. When we have our children, we can get a break. Whereas for men, things are changing. I know a lot of workplaces have paternity leave and there's carers leave, and there are a lot more uh, opportunities for men to take the breaks that they need. But when it comes to the day to day roles and responsibilities, there's probably a lot more freedom and opportunity that men would love to have in their roles in their workplaces.
Yeah, I think so. I can remember before I even got to university, I think I was aware that my dad got up every morning and went off to work in a job that he enjoyed, but it was still work for him. And I know that there were times when he was going off to work and he would have preferred to be doing other things. And I resolved at that time that I did not want a job where it was a chore.
Mm.
As it turns out, I pursued a medical science research career, and I thought that was exactly what I wanted. Um, but it wasn't. It took me a long time to realise that I'd landed in exactly the same sort of role that I'd kind of been critical of my dad for having. When I realised that and managed to change my life in a way that liberated me from that, um, everything becomes easy.
Mm. How did you go about that? Because it's, in hindsight, it's brilliant what's happened. And you were saying that you were able to gain this role at the start of the first Melbourne lockdown. And Tim and I are both in Victoria, so lockdowns are plenty for us.
Mm.
And so, but obviously the challenge of leaving one role, especially in a very senior role that you had worked into over your 20 years as a research scientist, and having no doubt PhD students under you and having other people that worked in your labs. How hard was it? Because I imagine men listening will be thinking, do you know what? That is something that I would love to do. They would understand that their mental health would improve if they had more freedom, flexibility, and enjoyment in the day to
Mm.
day. But how did you go about that, and over what time period did you were you able to make that change?
It's a very good question. Um, so you mentioned in your introduction about the prevalence of depression and anxiety in men. So I'm one of those. Um, I think your number was 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 men over their lifetime are affected by depression. I
Yes.
am one of them.
Mm,
I worked too hard for too long doing the job of three people in a previous role. I know I was doing the job of three people because when I left, three people were given the tasks that I had been doing.
wow.
Um, I had a period of 9 months where I didn't work and I recovered from an episode of severe depression.
Mm,
And I think at that time, uh, uh, that was like a circuit breaker. That provided me with an opportunity to think about what was important. Um, but I did something that I think lots of us do, and that is I. Some people would say I took the easy route, but I don't think it's the easiest route. I stuck with what was familiar. I had a research grant that was paying my salary, and I could interrupt that grant for 12 months. So I did that. And then it still had 2.5 years worth of salary on it for me. So I went back to the same role, albeit in a different institution and under very different circumstances. But I ended up in effectively the same job that had put me in trouble in the first place. And then it took me another decade to realize that and then finally extricate myself from it. Um, I think I, I know that I became frustrated because what was necessary to succeed in my career was not the achievement of things that are important to me.
Right.
Um, I felt like I wasn't being genuine. And I think that results in personal conflict for people generally. And I know it certainly does for me. I don't want to be spending my time doing things that I don't value or that I don't think are valuable to other people. Um, and I, I kind of, I'm self-critical when when I feel like uh, when I don't have respect for what it is that I'm doing. So probably 5 years before I left medical research, I had an inkling that I needed to get out. And over that 5 year period, I kind of wound up my responsibilities to PhD students and other roles that I had. Um, I I deliberately didn't take on new students um, over a little while, and I think that's because I knew I was getting out of there. And
Yes.
having done that, oh, woohoo! I think um, I said before that I took what some people might say is the easy path, but I don't think it's easy. I think it's familiar, and I think that we're inherently conservative beings, and we uh, we like familiarity. So
Mm.
we get used to the roles that we play at work and at home and in our social lives. And I think over time, there can be realizations that they don't suit, but we just plod on in those roles.
Yeah.
And it's the it's not easy to break out of that, which is why I think that we think about it's easy to keep going on with what is familiar, but it's not actually easy. We struggle to perform in those roles that we don't value or that we feel unappreciated in. Um, that that thing you said before about women having an opportunity to, or mothers having an opportunity to spend a bit more time around the birth of their children in different roles. Um, I've joked that I think that women are smarter than men, and they realise the value of those other things rather than work, and they embrace them when they're given that opportunity.
Mm.
Um, but I don't think that there's any real greater value of those parenting roles and things like that for women or men, or that women or men appreciate those any differently.
Mm.
I think we have a bunch of societal expectations that we feel like we have to meet.
Yes.
And fortunately, over time, we're being freed from some of those things. One of the things that we know from work that Healthy Male has done and the people that we work with is that these traditional roles of men, of these traditional masculinities like being stoic and tough, that they are restrictive. And when men find themselves in circumstances where their gender roles conflict with how they feel like they need to behave, um, that can be troubling for them and contributes to you know problems with mental health.
Yes. I'm glad you raised that. The idea of bottling up feelings and putting on a brave front and It's something that that's a stereotype. Not all men bottle their feelings, but there have been generations of boys and men that have been raised to suck it up, rub some dirt on it, don't show how you feel. Boys don't cry, and one of the most liberating things that any of us can do is make space for the men, for anyone in our lives, to be able to express how they feel, because we know what happens when any emotion, especially over a long period of time, emotions get put up behind a damn wall, that eventually that damn wall breaks, and often with really dire circumstances. And
Mm,
women do seek help more for their mental health. Women struggle with there are high statistics around women with depression and anxiety, and even suicide attempts, from to the best of my knowledge. But um, it's just such a worrying. It's just such a worrying part of our societal struggle when it comes to men's mental health, and
mm.
I really genuinely thank you for sharing some of your own story, and I appreciate that, because it's a vulnerable thing to do, to share openly about your own experiences, but it does really open a door for others to understand. And I wonder if you could share with our listeners that I know that you took some time off to look after yourself and take care of your mental health. What was it in the lead up to that time that you noticed? What did you observe about yourself? What were the signs and the symptoms that started to build? What were some of maybe the early signs? And how did they build to a point where you knew, I really need help for this? So that perhaps some listeners might be able to catch how they're going and struggling a bit earlier, and seek that help a little bit earlier too.
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, the lead up to me needing to stop work for my mental health was a period of time where I was trying to achieve something that ultimately proved impossible. I was working on a task and achieved it, and then the goalposts moved at the 11th hour, and uh, everything that I'd done was for nothing. Um, I just had to stop. It was clear that I could not function. But I think there had been signs of my depression. I know there had been signs of my depression and symptoms for a long time. And you mentioned in your introduction and just before that the prevalence of depression is believed to be higher in women than in men. Same goes for anxiety. But there's work that shows that perhaps that's not the case, and that different manifestations of depression and anxiety and other mental illnesses between men and women are responsible for this difference in rates of diagnosis. So there are various instruments for measuring people's mental health, like the Beck Diagnostic Inventory and all of those sorts of things. And there are some that now that are particularly tailored for men. So when you use the traditional depression measures, it appears that women experience depression more than men. But when you use measures that include examination of symptoms that are more externalizing symptoms, things like grumpiness, losing your temper, um, the prevalence of depression actually evens out. And for me, grumpy and losing my temper are things that I've done, or I had done most of my life. Um, I can use my mood when I drive the car as a barometer of my mental health. I get annoyed at other drivers doing stupid things on the road, or behaving in selfish ways on the road. I get annoyed at people who are selfish and stupid all the time. Um, uh, but I react explosively when I am mentally unwell.
Yes.
or when my mental health is not as good as I know it can be. There are times when I've stopped taking my antidepressants to see how I go, and I get angry when I drive the car.
Right.
So it's a beautiful use of that. But the grumpiness too. My dad's grandfather, he was called Far, and everybody in my family has always spoken about how grumpy Far was. I reckon Far probably was depressed, and
Yes.
that's how it manifests in some people, in some men and some women, but particularly in men. Um, so yeah, it wasn't until, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, when I was listening to the radio as I was driving to work one morning. I remember pulling into the car park at Monash Medical Centre, and a psychologist was talking about anger and grumpiness as symptoms of depression in men. And it was, God, a hallelujah moment for me.
Yeah. Oh, it is an amazing barometer. And I'm just, as I listen to you, I think what a gift that is to the fellas listening, because in our own lives, we do learn about ourselves, don't we? We learn about ourselves. And my barometer is, if I am getting really stressed about the state of the house,
Mhm.
I know my mental health is going downhill, because before I acknowledged and understood my mental illnesses, anxiety for a lifetime, depression kind of was what pointed me in the direction of getting help after 20 years of anxiety. I
Mhm.
used to clean, which is what my mum did. And it's also interesting that you say about your dad's grandfather. Did you say Far?
Far, yep.
Far, yes.
That's what it's called.
Far's grumpiness, that I've talked to mum a lot about, because both of my granddads on both sides of my families uh, were not good people. They didn't treat the people around them well.
Mm.
And so I was very lucky. My beautiful nan on my mum's side remarried. And Kevin is no longer with us, and neither is Nan. But he was my granddad through and through. He was a granddad
Mhm.
I'd always dreamed of having. So I was very lucky to have a second chance. But when I talk to mum, she reflects too on this idea that their mental health was probably so poor, and the daily struggles were so challenging, that it was behaviorally, you could see the outcome of that, but nobody understood. And
Yep.
so for you to say that the way you react in the car is a great barometer for you, I wonder if the the men listening and the men that listen to this podcast write to me, as do the women. And that one takeaway is such a nugget, because how how can we reach out for help when we don't recognize we need it? Um,
Yeah.
and so thank you so much for being so open. And I wonder if you could share with us some of the other things that men can look out for to help them understand that their mental health, and look, it's a spectrum. We know that mental health is everybody has mental health, and we can go from really flourishing mental health at one end to diagnosed disorders at the other. And sometimes our mental health is difficult and challenging because of an event. Maybe we've lost someone we loved, or lost a pet, or are having relationship problems or work problems. And when those problems are resolved, our mental health becomes, moves, it shifts to the more flourishing end of the spectrum, or in that positive direction. But for men who might be sort of wondering, I wonder if I should seek help, what are some of the other things that they could look out for?
Mm. Well, they that that grumpiness, that uh, anger, aggression, those externalizing symptoms of mental illness are much more common in men than in women. Um, it's interesting that we know more about differences between men and women in terms of depression than we do about anxiety, despite the fact that anxiety is about twice as prevalent. People just haven't really looked. There's a recent review article that I read from the people at Origin here in Melbourne, uh, and they point out that those externalizing type symptoms in men are more common in anxiety than they are in women with anxiety as well. So, these are those acting out behaviours. Um, yeah, substance abuse is much more common in men who are struggling with their mental health. Um, Risky behaviour is something else that men who are mentally unwell engage in more frequently. There are all those sorts of things. Um, one of the things that I touched on before was how men's ideas of masculinity can impact on them, and those masculine traits also influence how we experience mental illness as well and how we respond to it. An example being that it looks like when men are anxious, they are more likely to use problem solving based approaches to dealing with their anxiety. So that means that men are more likely than women to confront the stresses or the problems that cause them anxiety. And that's actually probably a good thing, because that problem solving approach is associated with a reduction in levels of anxiety, right? So that's awesome. There's men's masculinity resulting in a behavior that actually allows them to cope. But then, if it's a problem that can't be solved and you continue to try and solve the problem, that's self defeating. And then, this masculine ideal of stoicism and being tough, that prevents you from taking the next step, which is necessarily when the problem solving strategies don't work, and that is to talk to somebody about it. And that's where there's a problem. Now, you mentioned before about women being more likely to seek help for their mental health than men are. And at Healthy Male, I'm constantly railing against this dogmatic belief that men don't go to the doctor, right? I'm stepping back from mental health a little bit here to physical health as well. And one other thing is, this separation between mental and physical health, I think, is dumb. I really don't think that the separation of the two is sensible. I think Indigenous Australian people have known that for most of their 60,000 years too. We got a lot to learn from them when it
We
comes to
do.
the
Couldn't agree
actual
more.
what health is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Men do go to the doctor, and men do seek help for mental health problems. There's some data from, I think it's Vancouver in Canada, that shows that something like 8 out of 10 men who suicide have had contact with a health professional within the previous, it might be 3 months or 12 months or something like that. The um the temporal proximity that of seeing a health professional and obviously being affected by a mental health problem is actually quite short. So it looks like, and this is the ideas, the hypotheses that are being driven from these research findings, is that men might be reaching out, they might not be reaching out effectively, or the help that they get may not be effective. And now there's a whole bunch of differences again between men and women in what we want and what we need in order to look after ourselves well. Um, Women have longer appointments with their GPs than men do. There are data that show that. And that's one of those things that people use to say, men aren't utilizing health services as well as they could. Well, it's probably not the men who are determining the length of their conversations with their general practitioners. That's probably more driven by the practitioner, I reckon. And there are examples like that of where our health systems don't cater to the needs of men. And we need that part needs to be better as well. It's not just that men need to reach out for help, but when they are reaching out for help, the systems that are around to provide that help need to recognize that that call for help is being made, and that's not always picked up. And then once we've solved that, everybody's going to be happy, right? These are hard nuts to crack, Jodi.
So I guess one way to put it, and this is painting it with a broad brush, is that many men are reaching out for help, but somehow there's a disconnect between what they're reaching out, what they need help with, and what they're getting help with. There's a disconnect there, and their needs are not being met, and that there's obviously many variables that will influence that. What sort of things can men listening do when they do reach out for help? What can they do to optimize the chance of getting what they need? Is it around better understanding what they're reporting to their GP? Is it about uh, the articulation of what they're experiencing? Is it about taking some notes, maybe? I mean, I often say to people, if you are going to the GP to talk about your mental health, it's anxiety provoking doing that. It's stressful. We can sometimes lose our train of thought or not be able to recall well all the things we want to talk about. And so, would you recommend, jotting down a few ideas about what to mention and ticking them off in that appointment so that you've addressed the things that you really would like to talk about? What advice would you have just from your own? I know you're not a medical practitioner, but what advice would you have from your own perspective?
Evidence shows us that men have a higher threshold for going to the doctor than women do, it seems. Men men are aware of their health, but they monitor it themselves. They don't want to waste their time or the doctor's time by going to see a doctor unnecessarily, so they wait to see if their symptoms of illness pass. If they don't get worse, they figure they can cope with it and they might not see the doctor. In lots of cases, it's not until illness becomes debilitating, prevents men from going about their jobs or participating in the leisure activities that they like to do until they go and see a doctor. Generally, women will see doctors earlier in the progress of disease. This characteristic of men means that by the time they get to the doctor, the disease is worse than it needed to be before they started to get help. And of course, if your disease has progressed further, it's harder to treat. You go from preventing severe illness to having to deal with treating the severe illness. So everything that we know from research is that men are aware of their health. They are aware when there is problems, and this goes for mental and physical health. But we just tend to wait a bit longer before we seek help. So I guess the first thing is it's never too early, right? You're not going to inconvenience your doctor by making an appointment to see them and talk to them about these sorts of things. They are there for this, right? And frankly, they probably prefer dealing with patients who they know they can help than ones whose illness is much more challenging, right?
Yes.
So that's the first thing. And the other thing is that what we tend to do is look at the inconvenience of having to go and see the doctor, and the scale of that inconvenience we perceive as being greater than the value of seeing the doctor or of the scale of the inconvenience that might happen later.
Yes.
So it feels like making an appointment to go to see the doctor and finding the time out of your day to go and do that and getting there and waiting in the waiting room and all of these things. It's such a burden. but the truth is it's not. Um, I I've had conversations with friends who buy those glasses from the pharmacy that just have,
Yeah, the
you just buy them
magnification
off the
glasses.
rack.
Yeah.
Oh, I got two friends who've not seen an optometrist but wear glasses, and that strikes me as extraordinary. All of the service provision is effectively free. For people who have private health insurance, often getting the glasses would be cheaper if you went through an optometrist than if you went to the pharmacy and bought those ones off the rack. The the barrier to them is going to see the health professional. So I tell my friends who are doing things like that, make an appointment. Make the appointment now while I am here with you. Because I think for lots of people, that, and I know it's the case for me, that very first step is the hardest one. Once you've made the appointment, you work out ways to get somebody else to pick up the kids from school, or uh, get out of work a little bit early, or you know take the time off that you need. That's all simple. It's achievable. It's a bit like going for a run, right? The hardest thing about going for a run is putting your running shoes on before you walk out the door, right? Having done that, the rest's easy.
Yeah.
After blokes make an appointment to see a health professional, rest's easy.
Yes. I've been thinking this week about, with everything that could go wrong is going wrong here at home at the moment. So something died in our ducted heating. This will make sense. Trust me, I'll
Oh,
come back. Something died, a rodent of sorts. And so, when there starts to be a smell in the house, you're like, oh, that stinks. What anyway, so we have no ducted heating. The split system died. And so that needs replacing. The dishwasher, the heating element went. This is all in the space of the
oh,
last couple of weeks. And on the first day of daylight savings, we went out to do a barbie, and Pete came back in with all of the shazlicks and everything, saying the barbecue's not working. And so this week, I've had each day this week, as we're recording this on a Thursday. I've had to make time, and I, like you, I work from home. I have a lot of things that I need to get done, especially because I predominantly like to work while the kids are at school.
mm,
I have had to make time for quotes for all of these things because they're urgent. And it's funny, isn't it? When we can put something off, we do, but when we need to do something, we find the time to do it. And everything else I needed to get done got done. And what you said before is so, I think it's really worth coming back to, is this idea that the inconvenience that, in inverted, in quotation marks, that ensues when something has been left unchecked, the amount of time, effort, energy, input, medical appointments, just general disruption of life, when had something been caught earlier, when the body whispers, when the mind and the body are whispering, if we listen and act rather than waiting for the screaming to start happening, there's no comparison.
mm,
And yeah, so I think it's a really important thing. Yes, it might be a bit of an inconvenience in the day. Yes, it might mean jiggling things around, scheduling work around it, or asking for a little bit of time off. But it's it's imperative, isn't it? Because mental health challenges like anxiety, like depression, they are treatable, and the sooner the better. So I'm really thankful that you raised that, because I think the example I shared about everything that could go wrong going wrong, and having to urgently make appointments that you'd really rather not, but just have to be done. We all can relate to that, and we've got a little bit more agency when we can schedule the appointment around everything else when
mm.
it's not urgent.
Yep.
So I really appreciate you bringing that to the fore today.
Yeah, that's cool. Look, I think another thing that's worth mentioning is that, as frustrating as COVID lockdowns were for everybody, one of the profound benefits was that we now have a telehealth system that's funded at least in part by Medicare, which makes access to health professionals generally, but particularly mental health support, much much easier than it used to be. If you are somebody who has a busy life and you need help with your mental health and you need to be speaking with a psychologist, all you need is a quiet space
Yes.
and your telephone, because the provision of help for mental health, although it's perhaps more effective face to face and people seem to prefer it face to face,
Mm.
there are effective ways of helping people with mental health problems that can be done using telehealth. And I think that's the other thing. I know that there are people who provide uh, mental health support to men in particular who think that this is the game changer.
Oh, yeah. It's obvious, isn't it, now that you say it, that it is, it's so much easier. The barriers to access have
Mm,
been reduced in significant ways because
mm.
of that, because you don't have to leave work early. And leaving work early or making arrangements to go in person means you may feel uncomfortable about needing to say why. I mean, not that you have to
That's exactly
disclose
right.
what you're going to the doctor for, but um,
Yep.
it's more obvious, isn't it, when you're
Yeah.
leaving? But like you say, a quiet space, and that's quiet space could be in your car in the car park.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. It could be just in the stairwell. It could be walking around the block. Um, there are lots of opportunities where we can be in safe spaces to access this type of help that don't involve us revealing, if that's a concern to you, that you are being helped for these sorts of problems.
For men who are listening who feel like, okay, this is the time for me to make that call to reach out for help. What do you say to those fellas listening?
We know from research that men often turn to their partners or close family members or friends. And I think if men feel like they are happy to do that, then they are obviously uh, people who are likely to provide the help, and people who would hope probably that those men would come to them if they felt that they needed to. Um, I know from my own experience that having supportive individuals, people in your life, family members, um, can be a game changer. I never used the term game changer, but I've used it twice now, and I just said it for a third time. We also know that men tend to be reluctant. This is some research that Healthy Male have done. Men tend to be reluctant to use phone helplines. But, Men's Healthline, Beyond Blue, phone services like that can provide a great deal of help uh, in a very short period of time. And also, there are online resources from places like Beyond Blue that can be helpful in, the immediate period when somebody thinks, okay, I need some help. Um, Places like Beyond Blue are fantastic at directing people to help that is effective. And that's the other thing, Jodi, that is somewhat specific to men, is that we tend to like uh, health support that we can access conveniently, quickly, and that is effective in a short period of time. Men want to be fixed now. Um, I think there's a perception that some of these problems, things like depression and anxiety, are long-term health problems that might have been there for a while, that you just have to suck it up. You have to get through it, mate. That's not the case. There are some very effective things that can be done in very short periods of time to help people feel much better. Um, and that just involves reaching out to those places, those people that are already there. They're effectively waiting for you to get in contact with them. So again, it's that first step. Make that initial contact.
Yes, and I'll confer with you after we finish, and we'll ensure between the two of us that in the show notes that all of those clickable links are available for you and phone numbers so that you can just pick up the phone and make that call and make a start. And you'll be so glad you did. You'll never look back. And it's never too early, which is, I think, what I'll call this episode, because I think that's such a profound thing that you said earlier on. Tim, where can people connect with Healthy Male and connect with you if they would like to learn more?
So Healthy Male's website is the most obvious port of call, which is healthymale.org.au. My email address there is just tim.moss at healthymale.org.au, and people could contact me through that if they like. I would encourage people to have a look at the Healthy Male website just for interest's sake. Most of what Healthy Male does is sexual and reproductive health because of where it came from. But we do touch on all aspects of the health of, I keep saying men when I talk about it, but it's men and boys.
Great.
The other thing that we've started to do in appreciation of the fact that men reach out to their partners a lot is create partners guides for men's health problems. We don't expect that men's partners should be their health providers.
Yes.
But we do appreciate that when you love somebody, you want to be able to support them. So we've created these partners guides for, in most cases, women to try and explain what's going on, how their partner might be feeling and how they might be feeling, and how together, a couple or, a couple of friends might be able to address men's health concerns for a bunch of different things.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. I really want to just again acknowledge and thank you for sharing some of your own personal story. And I think it's really powerful when listeners can learn from the experiences of someone else, especially from another man who's open and talking about what some of the challenges have been through with your own mental health and how you've recognized that and what you've done about it. And, to talk to you here today where you're absolutely loving your work and feeling good and really feeling like you belong and flourishing. It's just obviously a shining example of the change that can happen when you make change yourself and seek help for your mental health. So I just really want to say thanks again for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jodi. Look, I, as a consequence of all of what's happened to each of us, we find ourselves here right now. And I've had a ball for the last hour. It's been great catching up with you, and I hope we get to talk again soon.
Absolutely, we will. Thanks everyone so much for listening. Oh my gosh, I just loved that conversation, and I am so inspired now to reach out. Already Tim's given me the name of somebody else I can speak to because, together, as we learn together, this is a learning experience for me as well, of course. We can support everyone around us, our partners, our friends, our children, and ourselves. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next time.